Hello everyone, just a small request. We have reached to an limit of Zoom, though we have premium version, and I would humbly request a few people to please exit and watch us through live because our resource person is not able to join and he called me just now. So it's a humble request from few people. Please volunteer yourself and please leave the meeting so that our guest is able to join. We request few more people to please leave and watch us through live. It's a humble request. Live link will be shared soon.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Okay, so do we begin?
Yes, sir. Just give me a few seconds. Let me check that whether we are live on YouTube or not.
Okay.
Then we will start.
Let me know if my screen is visible. Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Just let me know when can we begin, okay?
Yes, sir. So, hello everyone. Very good evening to each and all present over here. Hi Aditya. Welcome you all. Please don't do anything on the screen. All right. So, very good evening, sir.
Good evening.
It is my privilege and honor to introduce today's resource person, Dr. Shashi Bhushan, sir, Assistant Professor of History at LSR, University of Delhi. Dr. Gupta is an accomplished scholar of modern Indian history with a deep engagement in themes of identity, political discourse, and the making of modern India. He earned his PhD and MPhil in history, JNU, New Delhi, one of India's leading centers of historical research and critical scholarship. His academic training and research have consistently reflected a keen interest in exploring how ideas, identities, and narratives evolve through historical processes and collective memory. Before joining LSR, Sir has taught at Gargi College, Miranda House, and Daulat Ram College, all premium institutions under the University of Delhi. Over the years, he has taught a wide range of papers encompassing modern Indian history, museum studies, gender history, and research methodology, nurturing generations of students in historical thinking and analysis. Beyond teaching, Dr. Gupta has actively contributed to research in oral history and has been involved in several academic and administrative initiatives to strengthen the institutional culture of historical inquiry. Research papers and presentations at national and international conferences, along with his publications in reputed journals and related volumes, underscore his scholarly depth and commitment. Member of the Indian History Congress and other academic forums, Gupta remains dedicated to physical engagement with history both within and beyond academia. Lectures on subjects such as Gandhian thought, partition and gendered violence, and the politics of memory have been widely appreciated for their analytical insight and clarity. His workshop is regarding historical research methodology, a topic that forms the backbone of any serious engagement with history. Today, Sir will be speaking on understanding post-colonial India through the archives. His guide talk will guide us through the nuances of sources, inspiration, and historical reconstruction, helping us reflect on how historians create meaning from the past. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Sasbhushan Sir, whose scholarship and experience will undoubtedly offer us a rich and stimulating perspective on the art and craft of historical research. Thank you very much, sir, for accepting our invitation. Over to
Thank
you.
you. Thank you so much for inviting me over this platform. And those who don't know me, I'm Shashi Bhushan, as Aditya has already said. Right now, I'm teaching at Lady Ram College. The idea of this workshop came from classroom, where we are mostly engaging with the idea that how to do research and how to prepare a kind of a an idea of a research, how to go about it, what are the primary sources, what are the secondary sources, and most importantly, what is research, like what does research mean? Are we just copy pasting, or we are we just retaliating historiography, who's this historian said this historian said this? So research is something that you will understand in time with process, that it's not about repeating the same thing that has been already said. It's about reaching new conclusions, reaching new ideas. I hope this presentation, the insight that I'm going to provide will help many people. So without any delay, I'm going to start. So the very first thing that comes to the idea when you start a research, right? It's about how to decide a topic, like how to decide a topic, because it takes time. It does not come to you now, instantly. You cannot just pick a topic and start doing a research. You have to engage with the ideas. You have to take your time. It's a result of your interest, which comes from your social, political, economical, and most importantly, gender, right? What's your economic background? What's your political background? What's your social background? So when I started my research journey, when I went to MPhil and PhD, I worked on mostly on Bihar and Bihar. My PhD, my MPhil topic was Jamshedpur communal riots, and then in PhD I worked on emergency in JP Morgan. That idea did not come to me in one day. It took around a year to decide, to take a final decision to, okay, this is what I'm going to do. So your location also played a part in your research. Since we are part of a society, right? Our location, our geography, our society also construct ideas. So your location also becomes a very important part of your research. If you're keen on doing research, then start observing the trends around you. And most importantly, if you are keen on doing research, that you have to be observant. What is happening around you? What's happening politically? What's happening socially? What's happening culturally? How society is changing? How different trends in society culture is not working, in vacuums, but it's all related. How one economic decision, how one policy that comes, from the top, how it's going to impact on the society. And once you get an idea, I must say that you have to write it down because it does not have to be perfect. Write it down in either in a bullet points, make a chart, but you have to write it down. Your first piece of writing will lead you to your first draft. That idea that you will write it down with your first keen observant eyes, that idea will flourish with time. When you start doing research, when you start reading different articles, the after deciding your topic, one of the first challenge that we have is how to do literature review, right? What is literature review? Literature review is basically first you have to find out what kind of work is already done. So suppose if you choose, take example, if you choose a topic like partition, okay, so you have to decide, you have to look for what kind of work has been done on partition from different schools of historians. So like nationalist school, imperialist school, colonial school, right-wing historian, you have to understand that what kind of work is already done. Start with simple keyword search on Google. Read basics of the thing. You do not have to, go and take a deep dive into thesis and all. Start with Google. Start put the keywords. But yes, one I have to say this thing because you have to be very careful about what kind of websites you are looking into. You have to be very careful about propaganda. Now, in this course of literature review, books, thesis, articles, magazine, news, almost everything in your life, depending on your topic, will become part of your research. Some websites are like Sodh Ganga. Sodh Ganga is a major website where you can find uh, thousands of theses that people have already done. Then JNU website, JNU also has a remote access, plus if the portal is also open, DU also provides this. Then there is websites like JSTOR, EPW. EPW is Economic and Political Weekly. And most importantly, if you are still a college student, what you can do is you can start with college library. Ask the librarian for access to e-thesis. You might not understand the writing. Yeah, you might not understand the writing because it takes time to create that argument, create that idea. But if it's related to your interest, then check bibliography. That is the trick. When you maybe you don't understand the whole idea, the whole arguments and all that, but you have to look at the bibliography because there you can find some relevant sources for your research, the topic that you are seeking. The next step is research methodology. What is research methodology? That is the first question. Research methodology is about how we are going to pursue research, what kinds of methods. Then this also comes with primary sources. Primary is basically archival sources, manuscript. Secondary sources is published books, articles, magazines. Then we have oral histories, collection of interviews, memoirs. Whether in the process of interview, and if your research topic includes a field trip, includes interviews, then you have to be very, very careful about the interview because how you are going to conduct the interview. So to move on, something like how to organize your sources. I know writing a thesis in fourth year is not an easy task. So it's just a very small idea. It's a very kind of a layman idea I'm giving. Create a folder, which is a main file. Now create file folder within subfolder chapters. Now rename them as introduction, first chapter, second chapter, third chapter, conclusion, and bibliography. This is just, you're just making the folders. Now, what you do is gather all the material, books, articles you find during the research process and organize them according to the chapter where they best fit. So suppose you find an article, suppose you find a book, right? And the moment as a researcher you find a book or article, you have some kind of a blueprint. Where is this source, going? Where this source might fit? So what you do is don't, delay it. Don't wait that, oh, you'll go back to your room or you will do it later. Till right now, what you do is you put that folder, you put that book into a particular chapter. So what will happen is you will have a very systematic idea of your sources. Where is the sources? What kind of sources you have gathered? So like suppose you find an article which can fit into introduction. So put that article, download it, print it, and put it in, or you can say, an introduction folder. Similarly, an article, a book, or anything will go to a first chapter, second chapter. Now, something like research question. In your thesis, the most important question is what kind of research question you are asking. And this is something that many people also, kind of a struggle. What kind of research question I'm going to ask? How is this going to be different from the kind of work that has already been done? So what you can do is start with basics. Simple questions, start basic question, write down your questions. Once you start the research, when you start reading about it, when you start researching about it, the very first impression that you get from those material, write down a question. Suppose you are reading about partition. Okay. Now, when you are reading about partition, nationalist historiography, imperialist historiography, writing historian, and you might feel that, oh, my hometown is not into this discourse. So like, I'm from Ara, a small town in Bihar. My hometown comes in the nationalist struggle discourse in only one paragraph, right? If I ask you how many of you know about Ara, you might know about Ara, but only about Veer Kuwar Singh. That's all, right? But there is a larger role that my hometown people also played. Similarly, so this becomes my research question: ki, where was and what was happening in my hometown during partition, right? Let's write it down. And don't worry, this is not going to be your perfect final question because you will keep modifying it. The moment you research, the moment you keep digging about it, once you go to your hometown, once you dig into, you will find that the aspects of women, the aspects of gender, the aspects, so many different aspects will come out. And that's how you will keep modifying your questions. Your questions would reflect the core element of your research. You cannot ask a random question. It has to be a part of your core research. Your questions would be relevant to the theme. Suppose if you're working on partition, so you cannot talk about post-independence. You have to research, you have to put those questions which are relevant to your particular topic. Try asking new question. Try not to go with the conventional question. Now here, let me explain what is conventional topic and what is new question. Uh, Suppose you're working on partition. Now, partition major work has been done already. People have worked about India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and East Pakistan. The major discourse is about partition and Trump. Now, if you simply say that role of Gandhiji in the partition movement, that's a very vague question. That's called conventional question. In that question, you are not focusing on any particular area. You are not focusing on any time period. You are not focusing on any particular movement. What you are doing, you are just taking the whole subject as it is, and then you are asking a question that, okay, role of Gandhiji in national freedom struggle. Instead of asking this question, what you can do, you can say role of Gandhi or Gandhi's perspective on, let's say, communal question in provinces of Bengal. Because we all know where at the time of partition, Gandhi was walking in Noakhali. Why Gandhi was in Noakhali? Why he was not in Delhi? So instead of asking a conventional mainstream question, you can go for a shorter one. With research question, one advice that I always say that ask, a small question. Aapka research, your research has to be, located somewhere. It has to be in the structure. You cannot just talk about everything in research. You cannot just say that at the time of independence, this was happening. Because when you talk about Gandhiji in partition, then you will have to talk about all the 29 states and how Gandhi visited. And that research will be too vast, too large. When you go to archive with this topic, the problem is you will have a plethora, Pandora box of articles and primary sources. And then your problem will begin because you will not know how to frame it. So instead of taking a big question, take a small question. It's called kind of a micro history question. Then something like the next is chapterization. It depends upon your thesis. It depends on the idea. How many chapters you are going to write. Suppose you are writing an article. So you also have to decide create a template, how many pages you are going to write. You have to have that blueprint in your mind. That if I'm writing a thesis, my thesis will have 3 chapters or 4 chapters or 5 chapters. If I'm writing an article, then my article will have, like, let's say 30 pages, 20 pages. And then according to that blueprint, you have to create a template of your research. Prepare a draft as you do for your assignments. So I always say in the assignments also that you have to create the templates. What are, suppose you pick a topic, something like post-independence, let's say 5 year plans, right? 5 year plans, we know that there were 3 5 year plans. First 5 year plan, second 5 year plan, third 5 year plan. If you're working on the economic aspects of post-independent, you have to be very careful because you cannot just talk about everything. So what you can do is you can create templates that these are the pointers I'm going to write. So you can start with the challenges that the nation had before independence. Post independence, you can start with how the nation, solve these problems or could not solve this problem. It's up to your perspective. Then you can talk about which major sectors the government focus: industries, agriculture, education. Then you can create templates and then you can write one by one. In that way, your thesis, your article will have a flow, will have a structure. Categorize and decide how many chapters you want. First chapter should be the base of your research, more like an introduction. In thesis writing, right, first chapter is always like an introductory one where you are going to introduce your entire thesis. In first chapter you are going to introduce the topic, then you are going to introduce what kind of historiography has been done, and then you will say that in chapter 1 I'm going to discuss this, in chapter 2 I'm going to discuss this, and then you will continue with your chapters. The rest of the chapters will discuss your findings, arguments, and hypotheses. Once you start writing your second chapter, there you will start your main arguments. And again, I have to say this because you have to be careful, otherwise, it will become mixture. You have to decide, you have to create a template for your chapters also. That what points I'm going to put in which chapter. You cannot talk about economy, society, polity in all in one chapter because from a reader perspective, you have to give me a clarity. When I'm reading your research, when I'm reading your thesis, right, it has to be about one subject so that I will complete it. Like this is called art of writing. Like when you read a novel, let's say, when you read a novel, right, you read it in a day or two. But when you read an academic article, for your assignments, you don't feel like reading it. Why? Because that academic writing does not follow that idea. There you have to adapt that idea that how a reader will be interested in reading your thesis. Then the rest of the chapters will discuss your findings, arguments, and hypotheses. The next is bibliography. Here you have to basically give all the details of what kind of references we have basically researched. So in bibliography, we have something called primary sources. Most of you must know, and I'm sure that you know already. Primary sources is basically collection of manuscript, original papers, archival documents. Then secondary sources, newspaper, if you work, and especially I'm mentioning here newspaper because you will see further in my presentation also, in my talk also, that doing a research on post-colonial had its own challenges, and that's where newspaper comes in. So newspapers, magazines, unpublished sources. If you are lucky, if you are good at your oral history skills, then you also might gather some unpublished sources. I was very lucky that in my PhD field trips to Jamshedpur and different parts of basically northern India, I have got a good number of unpublished sources which were never published. And then we have oral sources. Oral sources, when I say oral sources, means basically you have to provide a number of interviews list, how many interviews you have conducted with the names of the interviewer, the place, the time. This is called basically bibliography. Now, I'll come to the second part of my talk. The first part, I basically talked about, you can say, a basics of the research. Reading post-colonial India. What is post-colonial India? Post-colonial is basically 1947 to 2025. And this period is also known as contemporary history. The research in this field has its own challenges. Unlike if you are a researcher, if you have interest in pre-47, you will find that it's comparatively easy. Why I'm telling you this? Because most of the official data is still classified. If you go to National Library, if you go to a National Archive, Teen Library, you will see that most of the official documents are not accessible for people still. For whatever regions, for state security, on the questions of national security, these documents are still classified. But the absence itself is a powerful historical statement. Why these are not available? That also can, that question, why these particular documents are not available in the source, the archive for people. This particular question can also become, a historical statement for your thesis, for your research. The archive only provides a group of selected, manually certified, material by state. When you go to archive is not a neutral place. You have to remember that as a historian. Archive is only giving you one side of history. You cannot do entire research, write an entire paper on the basis of archival sources. Those are the days, gone are the days when there were historians who worked primarily only on archival sources. Now we are entering in a time where there is oral history, there is public history, there is subaltern history, and more folk culture, regional culture is also coming out. So archive is not a neutral place. Archive is basically a very well, manually crafted archival sources by the state. Here, then the question is how to read an archive. If we have this understanding that archive is not a neutral place, then the question is how to read an archive. An archive is a constructed repository, not a neutral collection. Archive is basically a manually crafted collection by the state, by the actors of the state. The actors of the state who believe that, okay, this material is not going to harm us in any way. This material is giving access to this particular document to people will not create any problems for the state. That material is only there. What stories do the official archive of Post India tell? If you are a researcher in post colonial India, you also have to ask this question. Like, I'll ask you one question, and if you want to answer, you can answer in the Q&A session also. Think about it. Since childhood, we have been told about Nehruvian idea of development, Nehruvian cinema, Nehruvian socialism, but at the same time, you also have films like Do Bhiga Zameen, which shows the aftermath of development, how the so-called development, industrialization also created a labor class. And that is just one example, right? So I wanted to think about that what kind of historiography, what kind of discourse that we have been taught about nation state here, whose voices are preserved and whose voices are excluded. Often when we read history, right, we always say that, oh, this part is not discussed here. So that's why we have emergence of, let's say, subaltern school, feminist school in our historiography. Last 30 years have been very creative in the sense of history writing because we have emergence of subaltern history, we have emergence of feminist history, where the new accounts of historical details are coming out. Right? One of the important debate in historiography is the classical historian says that oral history is not history, right? But if you think about it, then who will write people's history? If not oral history, then how? And yes, there are challenges in oral history. So if you want to do a research which is primarily based on oral history, then you have to read one book called Oral History Reader by Robert Purves. Now, how does the structure of the archive reflects the priorities of the new state? When you go to an archive, when you go to a library, when you see the collection, when you're looking at the catalog, you have to find what's missing there because that missing part will tell you what is the priority of the state, what kind of people, what kind of culture does the state is promoting. Next is how to read post-colonial, right? So we are doing on a research. I have already told you that most of the archival data is not accessible to people. So the question is how to read post-colonial then. In my research process, in my MPhil and PhD, this is the big challenge that I faced. And so one of the important source will be census reports. Census reports basically categorization by caste, religion, and occupation. There is always a kind of a micro history which is neglected. Here, by reading census report, district gazetteers, you can always find that missing part, that missing, the idea. District gazetteers detail geographical and ethnographic surveys. This is helpful to contextualize your research in the region. Suppose you are working on, let's say, Tamil Nadu. You're working on caste system in Tamil Nadu in post-independent India. Now, obviously, archives will not give you the access, or mostly archive does not have that kind of material which talks directly about caste and atrocities. How to go about it? You can look at the census report. You can look at the census reports which has the data about how many caste, which kind of caste, and which caste was a majority, which caste in minority, how many people, their occupations. In those, you can say reading, you can also look at, prioritize the list as how many people were in the services from upper caste, from lower caste. So you have to do this research. Then police and judicial records, maintaining law and order. Crime and punishment records, this can be helpful to locate the local element of your research. Why I'm giving you this? Because police and judicial records are a very important factor. So when I was working on JP movement, Jayaprakash Narayana Andolan in emergency, I got hold of Buxar jail records, Patna jail records, Bar, Bakhtiarpur, Nawada jail records. In these jail records, you get to see the names of the people who were arrested. And the important thing that now, as a historian, with your perspective, you can categorize what kind of people were arrested. Were they students? Were they lower caste? Were they upper caste? Were these people like intellectuals of the time? How many people who were arrested got bail? Because all these records are there. And then you can do a comparative study of that data. Also, when we often say what is the work of a police, the work of the police is maintaining the law and order. That means maintaining the status quo. But in those records, when police lodges an FIR, when police writes a report, we all know that it goes to the archive. That record itself become the enemy of the state, because when you look at those records, you understand the, you can say, the patterns of caste atrocity. You understand the patterns of discrimination within the area. You understand the patterns of, let's say, development. What kind of land, one of the important issue, land reforms. You can also look at those records and understand how many people, what kind of people, which caste of people had what kind of land. Photographs and maps. A visual guide to your research is up to you how much you want to include, but always take photos. Whenever you go for a field work, you have to have a good camera, or at least if you even you have a smartphone. Nowadays, we all have smartphones, right? Your smartphone will become your companion in your research. You have to take pictures of almost every subject that you are either you are interacting, something that you see, maybe an old building and old something, a building that may be related to your research. You have to take pictures, because visual memory is a great thing here. Visuals are great technique to memorize the region and the people. So if you don't take photos, if you have collected, let's say, a series of interviews and primary and secondary sources, you might not be able to locate a particular source at a particular time, right? But if you have a habit of clicking pictures, maintaining a visual records, because of that picture, you will remember the context. Why did you click that picture? Why it is relevant? And in your conversations, in your research, it's always going to be useful. Now, next is key sources. What are the key sources for post-independent India, right? So newspapers, that's why I told you earlier that newspapers are going to be very crucial. Newspapers such as Times of India. If you don't know, Times of India has a digital archive. Since 1847, they have curated a very important digital archive. You can just go to the portal, you can put the keywords. Suppose if you're working on flood, right? Flood in Bihar, flood in Uttar Pradesh. You can just go and type the year and the flood keyword, and then whatever news was published in that year, that month will pop up. You can take either screenshots or you can download and print it out. I had downloaded like 1,000 copies from Times of India, and I basically printed later. Then Hindustan Times, Aaj, Sundays, Searchlight. uh, it would be very helpful when you are doing a research, right? There are some mainstream newspaper, national newspaper, right? But if you can also find some regional newspaper. So in my research, I found a newspaper called Searchlight. I found a newspaper called Azad Mazdoor, which was published from Jansakraya, and Azad Mazdoor is still in circulation. So I got hold of these, newspapers from the local area. So you can also compare. It can be also a very interesting subject that how a national media newspaper, which was operated from either Bombay or Delhi, and a regional newspaper was reporting about the same phenomena. What are the comparative, you can say, details about political, about social, about economical? How did people see 1971 when the entire nation was talking about Indira Gandhi and liberation of Bangladesh and liberation of East Pakistan? how the local newspapers of Jamshedpur, local newspapers of Patna, were talking about Hindutwadi agenda, and they were linking about Bharat Mata and all this concept. So it can also be a very good comparative study. Pamphlets are great help to understand the minds of the people. You can mostly find them in local libraries. Pamphlets means parchas, right? Uh, right now we have soft copies. We basically WhatsApp everything, but there are pamphlets, purchase. So you can find them in local libraries. Local libraries, and I don't know how, but and why they don't know their worth. But local libraries has a huge collection. It's just that nobody knows how to go about it. But if you are into post-colonial time, this is going to be your key. Then private papers, speeches, private papers of Jayaprakash Narayan, Indira Gandhi, Minu Mashani, and other leaders available at Teen Moti Library. Post-independence, may one of the major source is private papers of the leaders that are available in PM Sangrahalaya. There is speeches. Then Constitution Assembly debates, the ultimate archive of India's demographic founding, available mostly online. Constitution archive का जितना भी debate है, you can all download year by year, session by session. If you just put a keyword like Rajiv Gandhi. So Rajiv Gandhi has delivered multiple speeches in the Lok Sabha. All those speeches you can download. Creative works, novels, poems, and songs related to post 47 times. So here we can talk about films, we can talk about literature, we can talk about songs that presented the idea. Like in the times of emergency, I'm sure some of you already know that Kishore Kumar was banned from Akashvani because Kishore Kumar did not support emergency. So Kishore Kumar, all the songs of Kishore Kumar was banned. At that time, as a resistance, a film came called Kissa Kursi Ka. Now that movie will become a repository for your research because in that movie we'll see how the cinema, how art became a mode of resistance, right? Similarly, you have literature. You have literature from pro-government also, anti-government also. So you have Khushwant Singh at the same time who praised emergency, who cited Indira Gandhi. At the same time, you have Binod Mehta, who wrote the Sanjay story, who wrote about how Sanjay Gandhi was, a spoiled brat. So you have both the sides in the literature. Also, we have Basudha Dalmia, you have Uma Basudev, and all these people, how they were, Kuldeep Nair, the most important name. So in post-independence time, this will become a major source for your research. You can get an idea of the time, but don't depend on these writings entirely. Cross-check them. Also, one thing that you have to be very careful about reading this non-historical works is that you have to keep in mind that these are not historians. They are not going to delve into the social, political, economical aspects with a critical mind. They are just writing as it is, and most of them has a political agenda. Most of them has chosen sides. So like Kuldeep Nair, like Basudha Dalmia, like Kumi Kapoor. Kumi Kapoor has published a very profound book about emergency. But you have to remember that these are not historians; these are political activists. And when they are writing about it, obviously they are going to choose one side. As a historian, your duty is not to just report that okay, this is happening. As a historian, your duty also to analyze where they're writing okay or not. When Komi Kapoor is writing that Subramanyam Swamy and all these people were fighting for the independence of India, and when JP was called as a second Gandhi, right? How far this claim is true, that's your job. Your job is not to just cite that this person has said this and this person has said this. So while checking these records, you have to be very careful. Now, the next I want to talk, yes, key sources. So personal archive diaries, letters, memoirs of individuals such as Khushwant Singh, Indira Gandhi, JP, jail diary, LK Advani jail notes. So these are the leaders, these are the political figures that wrote diaries. Like JP wrote a very important diary called Prison Diary, which he wrote in 1975. When you read all this, you have to be careful, as I said earlier, oral histories. Depending on your research interest, you can take interviews. Suppose you were like, when I was doing my PhD field work, so I conducted more than 70 interviews in the span of 3 years. Okay. So 2018, 19, and 20, I was continuously doing field works. And in those interviews, ultimately, when I sat down to write, I realized that only 15 interviews are going to be useful for my research. Most of the interviews that I took was only a kind of a story that they were recalling. Most of the people did not have anything to substantiate their argument. Like one of the interview I remember, that interview went on for 3 hours. This person gave me immense amount of details, everything, that how he was there, he was the leading. But when I asked for a proof, when I asked for a photograph, a letter, didn't have anything. Still, I wanted to include his interview because it was very interesting. So there's a way that you can also cross check. So what I did, what I was taught in my by my supervisor and my teachers, I did a cross check. I took an interview in the same location, the person who knew the person A, and I asked him the same set of questions. And I asked about person A also, that what do you think person A was there or not? The amount of detail that I have got, that's kind of become fascinating because I realized the oral history views, and that's where the problems of oral history comes. How to authenticate a oral history interview, because people will say anything. People will always put them as a hero, that I was the one, I was doing that. Now, how to authenticate it? You are not literature people. We cannot simply believe as their people are saying. We are historians, so we have to have a primary or secondary or something. So cultural archives such as novels, films, photographs, art as a historical document that provides details such as Kissa Kursika, a film, Trishul, visual suggestion, a photograph from a personal collection, mostly available at Teen Murti, example, Raghu Rai collection. You might have seen a very famous picture of Indira Gandhi sitting in a room and all these male leaders of the Congress party standing around her. That is one famous picture taken by Raghu Rai. Raghu Rai has a very important collection of post-independent times. Now, hmm, yeah. Now the question is what kinds of topic one can explore in post-independent time. So as I always say, it's up to your research, it's up to your interest, but I'm going to suggest some. So like forest movement, what kind of forest movement happened in post-independent times? Political regional movement like JP movement, Tevaga Andolan in South. So this kind of gender and sexuality is not been discussed at all in post-independence time. That's why we have to take a step and understand that how gender, how sexuality is written in post-colonial times, how the policies impacted on them. Tribal studies. So like when we know about that how the government in 1947 came, we got independence, and the whole idea of DNT came. But was there a real change? Was how did the policymakers and the policies impacted on tribal cultures and people, right? So there are almost no studies. Caste in independent India. How independent India, how the nation state responded to the idea of caste. Cinema, foreign relations, agricultures, and patterns of migration. How patterns of migration, like I always ask this question in the class also, that why do you think why Bihar is a backward state in the last 200 years, right? And the questions are always, answers are always around corruption and politics. But the backwardness of Bihar is not just because of the corruption. Its answer lies in the historical roots of industrialization of India. Because when industrialization was happening, people from Bihar and Awadh were taken as a laborer. So we have records of Girmitiyas, people from Awadh, people from Bhojpur region were taken as a Teen Kathia Mazdoor in parts of Mauritius, Fiji, Trinidad. So like Mauritius people speak Bhojpuri. How did that happen? Because it is related to the patterns of migration. Economic development, rise of capitalist houses in post-colonial India, constitution, nation building, rise of right wing and the role of populist movement. You can also work something like industrial development and impact of rural India. Like when we talk so much about industrial development, the whole nation, the whole government was focusing on industrialization and the development of the nation. What was rural India doing at that time? How rural India was impacted? How people from the rural backgrounds were forced, almost forced to leave their houses, to leave their, you can say, gaon, kasba, chhod kar, how they were forced to go to a metro cities. Like, if you think about it, why a country like India has these major economic hubs, right? So we always say that Bihari people come to Maharashtra and come to Delhi. Why would not? Because the problem is this is the economic hub that the state has created. If the similar opportunities are there, why would anyone come? So you can also look at the patterns of migration, how people responded, how people were forced. So like Girmitia culture, Pravasi culture, then South Asia and decolonization. Since we're talking about post-independence, if you have an interest in South Asian politics, you can also talk about, let's say, the South Asian decolonization time. You can talk about NAM, you can talk about Panchsheel, you can talk about how the foreign policy impacted, right? Then urbanization, oral history, partition, violence, riots. Like we often think about that post-independence time was all good, right? But there were riots. That's what I looked at in my MPhil thesis. That since 1961, these are official records. 1961, the first major riot that happened in Jabalpur. How it started a series of riots in post-independent India. When we're talking about that, how post-independent India, the nation was focusing on industrial development and everything, but at the same time, how people on the ground were facing this violence against women, area studies, Northeast, socialist movement. These are some possible research topics that I can suggest to you. Now, what are the best practices you can have as a researcher? Include images of archival documents, maps from the period, photographs, key texts, briefly defined terms. In your thesis, in your research paper, you have to be very careful about including these terms. So if you're working, so you have to decide what you have to describe what is post-colonial. You have to write a kind of a definition. What is neo-colonial? What is South Asia? What region is called South Asia? What countries are there, right? When you first use them, always place document in their full historical, political, and bureaucratic context. Understand why a document was created, by whom, and for what purpose. Don't take records for face value. Suppose you find a record, right, in an archive. You cannot just read and copy it to your research. You also have to ask this question, why this document is there, why this document is created, who gets a benefit from this document, and historically, what kind of historical narrative, what kind of historical idea does this document providing. Okay, so you cannot just take at a face value. Keep meticulous notes not just about content, but also the conditions of your research. So, in the span of 8 years of my research, I have a collection of almost 13 to 14 diaries. The one that you have seen with the Madhubani paintings, that's my favorite diary. So, you do not just have to keep a data about, that newspaper, but also the condition of the research. What is the condition of a particular library? Because that detail can also become part of your introduction or conclusion, an argument that why a particular state in Bihar, why a particular state in Delhi has focused on a particular person, why they have all the data about one particular incident and why they don't have others. Then you can contextualize that this is the reason. Then uh, to continue, now what is our responsibility as a researcher? To just write the thesis, get a degree? No, our responsibility has larger things. We have a larger responsibility because archives are not neutral data, right? As I've said earlier, this contains stories of trauma, secrets of the state, and these are not a kind of small things. And the voices of the marginalized, handling them is an ethical act. I always give this example. Suppose you are interviewing a riot victim. Okay. Suppose you are working on violence and violence against women and you are taking an interview. You have to be careful about your questions. You cannot just ask a random question that might sound insensitive to women or insensitive to the family members. So as a researcher, you have to be very careful about how you are handling a subject. So suppose if you're taking an interview of a riot victim, of a violence victim, if your interview, if your subject is saying that, see, or the person is not comfortable giving an interview alone, then do not ask for it. If the family wants to sit, let them sit, because that's just one example I'm giving from my experience. Because revisiting those details of violence might trigger, right? In that moment, that family sitting there can be a big help. And if the family is asking you that they will sit with the interview, let them sit, because also for the family also to recollect all those details about a particular incident, it's like it's become a collective trauma of a family. The riot victims, violence victims are not just facing this alone, the entire family has to go through. So you have to be very sensitive when you are doing this. Handling them is an ethical act. Now, what duties do we have towards the subject of the document, the descendants of those subjects, and the public seeking truth? Now we have a very genuine question that, okay, we are the researchers, we have a question, and we have to bring out the truth. You also have to understand that, yes, bringing out the truth You have a duty, but at the same time, you have also a duty towards the subject, right? I'm not asking you to compromise with your research ideas, but I'm asking you, all I'm saying, given my experience, is that you have to be considerate to the, to the victims, to the idea, to your subject. Ethical archival practices requires navigating a complex triangle, and this part is important. It's called access, representation, and responsibility. Yes, you have a right to access, you have a right to representation, but with that also comes something called responsibility. Like the way you are accessing a proper, you can say, a particular topic, a particular subject, right? And you want to represent that, you have to bring out the subject. But at the same time, you also have a responsibility that your research, your conclusions should not be insensitive. Your tools should not be insensitive towards that. Now, next is, these are some of the books. The book list is endless, by the way. These are just some, somehow I managed to gather five, but trust me, the reading list is long. But you can start with these historians: E.H. Carr, What is History, Historian's Craft, Mark Bloch, Gerda Lerner, The Majority Fights Its Past. You can also read Carlo Ginzburg. This will give you, this book is amazing, only that you have to contextualize it in the European history. And the basic textbook is Textbook of Historiography by E. Sridharan. Now, why I'm suggesting this is, before starting a research, before going into details of a particular subject, these books will give you a framework, like EH Carr. EH Carr will tell you that how fact works. What is the importance of a fact? What is a fact and what is a not, right? Historian craft will tell you that how a historian's responsibility is to craft the story, but with ethical responsibility. So these five will give you a basic idea that how one can pursue this particular profession, a particular idea of research. So these are some books, a suggestion that I'm giving. Now, these are the findings of my research. So posters, photos, oral interviews that I did in my during my PhD times. So if you notice if you can read the Hindi ear, this is a part of a diary that was written, that was basically done in a jail. I took an interview of Mr. Deepak Srivastava in my hometown. He was in class 10th when this JP movement started. He had no idea about the movement. He has no political orientation. And when I interviewed him, he was laughing. He was saying, हमें तो कुछ पता ही नहीं था, हम क्लास 10th में थे, आंदोलन चल रहा था, लोगों ने कहा जुड़ जाओ, हम जुड़ गए. This statement is going to be your part of your research, because that you can say that everyone who participated in the movement, they were not necessarily a political activist. It was a public sentiment. You can say, so you can read the diary here. He was in Buxar jail. So if you can read this part, Buxar Kara. This is a piece of newspaper that was published. So I took this photo. These are some magazines for oral history, especially for post-independence. If you are very keen, there is one place which is like a treasure for post-independence history. Is It's called PC Joshi Archives. If you want to write it down, it's a place in JNU, sixth floor. It's also called Contemporary Archive. The name is PC Joshi Archive in JNU main library. Right? That entire floor is dedicated only to post-independence. So all these collections that you are seeing, this socialist Bharat, secular democracy, I found it there. So these are the posters. If you can see, Garibi Hatao was a very important slogan that Indira Gandhi gave. Now, this is a pro-Congress, both of them are pro-Congress magazine. And if you read you can say the front thing, you will see that how these magazines are trying to justify the Congressy act of putting an emergency and or suspension of democracy. So Garibi Hatao, Bhumihin Khatir Mazduro Ki. Now, these pictures and the content of these pictures is also a kind of a material for your research, because you can always pinpoint that there was one particular magazine who were writing, pro-government like this. Then this is another part. Congress ही एकमात्र party. This is Socialist Bharat magazine, which was published in Hindi. And if you notice at the bottom, जो केंद्र में मजबूत सरकार कायम कर सकती है, कांग्रेस को वोट दे, right? And this is Socialist Bharat. This is another newspaper piece that I had. So what I have done in my research is I have collected, let's say, 20 years of newspaper and their news Their articles, when they were talking about JP, when they're talking about Indira Gandhi, when they're talking about emergency. So I have a big kind of a collection about last 20 years of reporting on, let's say, emergency in Bihar or in Uttar Pradesh. So these are some kind of some. So this is, and again, a newspaper in Bihar, which were reporting Loknath ki Smriti Sanjo hai Sitab Diera. And this is one of the famous kind of a cartoons of the time. So you can see Janmat, basically it means democracy, and JP on the top of this particular thing. So basically it symbolizes how the entire opposition came together to destroy democracy. Now this is published in a pro-Congress magazine, so you can understand the context when you look at it. These cartoons which were published, these cartoons are also a very important subject of your study, can be also a part of your study. Because when you look at this, you understand that the whole purpose of this cartoon is not to glorify GP, not to glorify, you can say, uh, the opposition parties. No, but here the prime motive is to show that how JP, with the help of opposition parties, are trying to destroy the democratic setup of India. So that's why you see the big door called Janmat. Janmat is basically democracy. And this picture is basically the person I interviewed. He is Deepak Srivastava. And if you look at the bottom, this is Jayaprakash Narayan. This picture was taken in Sitab Dhiera when JP was visiting his village. So this is the only picture that Deepak ji has. Deepak ji was kind enough to give it to me, and this is a picture. And basically, thank you. At the end, I want to say that doing research is a tough task. It takes time. It takes a toll of your mental health. But if you do it systematically, if you do it with the structures, templates, if you know what you're going to do, you cannot just go blind and just start doing research on everything. You have to have a strategy, how to go about it, how to write. The question about writing also comes important because how we are going to write, right? So first you have to decide your topic. Collect your sources, organize them in particular folders. If you don't have a laptop, do one thing: buy those simple folders and put them. Take a prints and put them in the folders. Separate them. Once you are organized, even if you have not written anything, you can have those in your collection. You always have that confidence that I have done this much, so I can go further. So this is what I had to share today, and I hope that this will help you in pursuing your research. So thank you so much. Aditya, you can take over?
Yes, sir. So hello everyone. Thank you very much, sir, for this wonderful session, and think the audience has benefited much. Now I'm opening the floor for questions. Please be short, and we'll take. I think it will be half an hour Q&A round. So please raise your hand and I'll get back to you. And please be short and brief. Yes, Shubham Rawat.
हेलो सर, am I audible सर?
Yes, you're
Yes,
audible.
yes, audible.
सर लास्ट टाइम मैंने जब रिसर्च किया था सो आई एम इन सेकेंड ईयर नाउ. सो मैंने लोथल का चूज किया था बट उसके रिसोर्सेस ही नहीं मिल रहे थे. लाइक उसके जस्ट आर्कोलॉजिकल सर्विस पर ही बेस्ड था, सोर्सेस पर बेस्ड था कि तो उसके लिए क्या करें कि उसमें भी ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा रिसर्च कर सके और सोर्सेस कैसे फाइंड आउट करूँ. लाइक लोथल के लिए रिसर्च करना होगा तो लोथल.
Okay. I can answer one by one, or I can take like 4 to 5 questions and I can answer them collectively.
So I think that will be better.
Yeah.
Taking few questions at them. The next, Anubhuti, please unmute yourself. Yes, go ahead. You're not audible. No. Yes, Firdaus.
Uh, If there is a technical problem, what you can do is you can write your questions in the chat box. I can answer one by one.
Yeah, I think that will be better.
Yeah. And till then, I can answer this question.
Yes, sir.
Frankly, I'm not an expert of ancient India. I have done my MPhil PhD in modern, but about the sources I can suggest you is that you mentioned Lothal, right? So what you can do is you can find sources that is related to Lothal, right? You can go on, you can say websites, related articles that has been already published. You can find on JSTOR, or you can also ask your teachers who are expert in ancient India that how we can find more sources about this particular period. Okay.
I think you're able to access the chat box now.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Oh. A research process requires a lot of reading. It feels overwhelming, and I forget a lot of things which I read previously while reading something else. How to know what is relevant and what is not relevant to read? When do we begin the writing process after this huge reading process? How do we decide? Okay. How do we decide what exactly to write? Basically, how to organize our thoughts and express them in a crisp manner. Okay. It's not a question, it's a paragraph, and I'll answer that. See, don't worry about writing. Okay. Once you stop worrying about writing, half of your tension will go. Because in order to write, you have to read first. So I'll suggest stop worrying about the writing. Create the templates in your laptop, right? At least mentally, psychologically, you will be like, okay, I have something. But I'll say that do not worry about writing right now. Writing part is done in the last 3 months. I wrote my PhD in the last 1 year. Rest of the time I was just collecting, taking interviews, visiting libraries. Last 1 year, I sat down, right? I created a corner for myself in the house in the library and started writing. So don't worry about writing right now. What you have to worry is sources and reading about how to remember all of that. So what you do is you have to have a meticulous noting system. You have to note down everything. You cannot just read something and that कि हाँ ये तो याद रहेगा नहीं होगा. You have to create a systematic idea. Like when I read a book, and thanks to my seniors, thanks to my teachers who taught me this idea, I'm just passing along the tradition. So when I read, right, what I do is when I use a pencil in a book, and when I read, I write important, I write note, or I just give a simple two ticks, or I make a star. Every symbol has a different meaning for me. So when I'm putting a star on a particular paragraph, that means this is the most important thing. When I'm putting, let's say, important, IMP, that means this particular part can be used somewhere. When I'm putting two ticks, okay, that means that this particular paragraph can be used, in the introduction or conclusion. So you have to create your own style of reading, and most importantly, you have to note down everything. You have to note down what are the arguments, and yes, it's a tough process. It takes time. So research is not also easy. So what you can do is you can start now. Once you start writing down, once you start taking notes, you will see within 6 months, you will develop a new kind of your own style of writing and reading, right? Now, Tahmeed, sir, do you think enough work has been done in post 1972 war and the migration of Bangladeshis to Assam and the eventual violence riots like the Neel massacre and the eventual singing of Assam Accords with government of India? See, you can always find out, right? You can always just Google it. If you're not Google, then you can go to Sodh Ganga, type the keywords. If there are work that has been done, you can also find those particular theses. That is, oh, this is the work that has been done about this. You can find articles that have been published in the newspaper. If you are from Assam, check the Assam archive. They have an online portal, by the way. Assam archive is online. So you can check online that what kind of work has been done, what kind of data they have. Gauda has asked, feminist historians like John Scott, Judith Butler criticizing the sacrosanct nature of archive. How archive, which is mainly male-centric, is important to understand gender history. Yes, I agree with that. Like colonial records, who were writing and what are they writing? right? So yes, I completely agree with that. Sanskriti has written, how do we keep our work as neutral and politically unbiased as possible? First of all, if you ask me this question, I'll say nothing is apolitical. Being apolitical is also a privilege. Okay, everything is political. Your history writing, your novel writing, even a simple poem is political. Yeah, right? Because it's being political is not something that you choose. Being political is something that you are already part of. It's just that you have to realize that okay, this is political. So according to me, there is nothing apolitical. No study can be said that oh, it's a apolitical study. Every study, every book, every research article has a political side, has a political agenda. It's only matters when a reader realizes it, right? A graduation kid cannot understand the differences between, let's say, nationalist historiography and you can say a right-wing historian, because sometimes they sound very same. They both glorify Bharat Mata. They both talks about Desh Bhakti. But what are the differences? That you understand with reading. When you when you analyze. Okay. So Toss has written, I'm doing research on colonial governments of Sikandrabad cantonment region. I'm finding it difficult to look at the questions of how prostitutes. First of all, please update your vocab. Now we are using sex workers. Let's also give them the respect that they deserve. And native women were challenging INC colonial governments. What could be my possible sources? Newspapers. Yes, Firdaus. Newspapers can be a very important source for your study. Also, you can check Hyderabad archive. Hyderabad has a very important archive, and I believe that not entire thing is online, but some of the part of this are already online. So yes, newspaper can be a very important study. Also, you can say Nizam papers are also available, if I'm not wrong. You can also look at the Nizam papers and how they were responding to these. Tuti has written, art, films, cartoons can be heavily influenced by the creator's personal biases. How do we use this as a sources to ensure that what we stay neutral? Yes, as I've said earlier, when you read post-independence and when you read any book, any cartoons, any picture, it's always a personal choice, right? That's where you come in. That's where a historian comes. We are not like a lit historian who can just quote anything. No, as a historian, you have to cross check. You have to, as a historian, as also to check that okay, what is the background of a particular author? If Kuldeep Nair is writing about Congress atrocities and police brutalities in post-independence India, is he also writing about the same about the non-Congressy government? If he is not, that means you have identified that this author has a kind of a political agenda. Now, hers. Sure, you mentioned conducting interviews for research, but how do we identify the subject for our study? How do we request an interview with them? That's a very important question, hers. So, the links, what you call links. How do we find interviews? How do we conduct the interview? In the process of research, when you meet one person, right? One person gives you a detail of a particular place, and then you keep finding links. So that person might suggest you somebody who was there. So in my research also, it just kept happening. So I went to one person, that person suggested two other names. I went to two other people, they suggested two other people. So it creates a chain of people, especially if you focus on one particular idea. Suppose, let's say, Delhi education system. As an example, I'm just saying. So, what was the mode of education in Delhi in, let's say, post-independent India, especially in a violence-rich India? Am I audible? Am I connected?
Yes, sir, you're connected.
Yeah. So you have to find, you can go with the municipality records, then you can go to the people, you can look at the Sarvodaya Vidyalaya, Delhi mein Sarvodaya Vidyalaya, Delhi mein primary schools, you can look at those records, find those people, go to those localities. Suppose you're working in education, go to those schools, historical school, talk to the principal, talk to somebody who was the most senior there. They can guide you, okay, talk to this person, you might find something there, go to this place, you might find something there. उसमें भी अगर आपको कुछ नहीं मिल रहा, you can always go to the local library, because the local library is the place where most of the elders sit and they talk. If you go and talk to them and if you ask them questions, they will answer, but you have to be careful. You cannot simply believe everything that they say. Now, Amit, sir, could you please elaborate using oral sources? Many times people, particularly women in rural areas, have no proof of substantiate their claims, particularly socio-religious suspect. How to deal with such issue? See, there is a challenge with oral history. As I said earlier, yes, there is a challenge. How to substantiate your argument, right? Especially about women, especially about gender, especially about violence. Here, you can also use one thing that's I also use. You can also look at the folk culture, like folk geet, folk art, how that particular incident is being remembered. I'll give you one example. 1857, खूब लड़ी मर्दानी हो तो झांसी वाली रानी थी, right? We talk about Subhadra Kumari Chauhan and the mainstream narrative. But until you read Charu Gupta, Dalit Viranganas of 1857, you don't realize that, oh, this poem is not directly mentioned, was about Jhansi Ki Rani. It was about Asa Devi, Ura Devi, and Churan Devi. But how the historical narrative has created this mainstream idea that now, when we're saying Khub Ladi Mardani wo to Jhansi wali Rani thi, we're actually thinking about Jhansi Ki Rani Lakshmi Bai, right? So there you can also use folk culture. You can also ask around, you can also study that what kind of stories, what kind of folk culture, what kind of folk songs that there are. Like in Bihar, if somebody is working on migration, okay, in Bihar, I always say in Bihar, Bengal, and Awadh, one can always work on the folk songs. How Bidisiya ke gaon na leke jaiye ho. Right? There's a Awadhi and Bhojpuri songs about migration process. I remember Sahid Amin taking a class on migration in Girmitia, and he started talking in Bhojpuri. And then he told us about these particular Bhojpuri and Awadhi songs about migration. जैसे पिया के लेके गई हो this is a part I'm speaking Bhojpuri. So like पिया के लेके गई विदेशवा जाइए हो शेर भर गेहूं बरिस भाई खाइबे मतलब 250 ग्राम चावल है मैं साल भर खा लूंगी लेकिन मेरे पिया को वापस लेके आओ. So in the absence of the mainstream sources, you can also look at these folk cultural songs, stories. Like there's a story about, and I'm pretty sure this story is a part of Shekhar Bandyopadhyay's book. A soldier who went to Burma came back with a lot of money, but he was not allowed to enter into his village. This happened in Awadh. So he died on the borders, on the periphery of the village, and later, the villagers, गांव वालों ने उसके सारे पैसे लेके रख लिए, but he was not allowed. Right? When you go now, when you go to Batlapur, Mirzapur area, this particular Sitaram, he's a soldier, he has become an icon, and there are folk stories about him. So in this, you can also do that. Now, could you please explain what you meant by historian role is not to report? Uh, okay, I'll say this. What is a work of a historian? Does our work is like, suppose it's raining outside. Is my work is to just report that, oh, it's raining outside, right? It's not our duty to report as it is. Okay, this is happening, this is happening. Our work is also to analyze why this is happening. Why at a particular juncture of a particular century, when we're standing here in 2025, why India is turning into like this, why India is changing its own social political characters. You cannot simply report it, oh, this happened. No, we also have to go back, look in the past, because historian work is to learn from the past. We also have to look for the patterns. What happened in Germany, right? That's one example. So you can always say that it's not our duty to report. Our duty is to analyze, criticize, being engaged in a critical engagement, and then reach that, okay, this is why it's happening. Okay. Now, how to create a differentiate in our study papers, especially when they are quite already been done on. Here, you have to be very careful. Suppose you are working with partition. Partition is overdone topic. 1857 is overdone. You have to be careful about that. If is your topic really bringing something new or not? If you're talking about the same thing, nature of 1857, there are 1,000 books on 1857. If you can talk about, let's say, a particular region in 1857, and if you have find sources, then you can work on it. Now, sir, I want to know the difference between post-colonial and neo-colonial. I want to methodology of post-partition gender in Bengal through the cinema. Post-colonial and neo-colonial. Okay. My research is discourse analysis on Muslim women's writing, especially magazines in early 20th century India, specifically Kerala. Are there any resources I could be aware of, any book suggestion that would be helpful? I'm at the previous stage of my PhD research. Frankly, my knowledge about Kerala is limited to films. I'm a huge fan of, Mammootty. उसके अलावा I haven't actually read much about Kerala. Also, my research, given my MPhil and PhD, was mainly centered in North India. So I'm sorry on my part that I don't know this. How do I preserve oral sources? If you are conducting an interview, record it, write it down, transcript karo usko, write it down, because you have to have a copy. Make multiple copies of the video, make multiple copies of the interview. And the best practice that you can do is you have to transcript it. Listen to the recording, write it down as it is. It has been discussed in the recording, because that will also help you how to create a framework when you're writing that. So I'm working on Dalit politics in post-colonial Bihar. In the case of analysis, newspaper editor's period, what are the different filters that I need to use for choosing a newspaper? Is it according to the type analysis? For this, I'll suggest two places. One is Sachidanand Sinha Library, Patna, and second is A.N. Sinha Institute, which is near Golghar in Patna. These places has a huge archive of local newspapers. You can also go to Jamshedpur. There is a Tata archive, but I will not suggest until unless you don't find anything in Patna. You can go to Tata archive. They have a good archive. You can check. Aditya, how many questions are there? Okay.
So we have come to 5 questions.
Okay. Sir, please share something how to confidently defend your topic in PhD interview. My topic is present history of Eastern United Provinces. Uh, how to confidently defend your PhD topic is entirely you. Okay. Nobody can suggest you how to defend, because even I remember when I had my MPhil and PhD Viva for the when I had to defend, I was nervous. I was very nervous. Frankly, I was very nervous. So it's up to you how much command you have, how much how much sources, how much discussions you have engaged in, how's your historiography, what is your yeah. You have to be very clear about your hypothesis. You have to be very clear about your methods of research, because these are the general questions they ask, that what kind of method did you follow, what are your primary hypotheses, why did you choose this topic. So these questions you have to have a kind of a framework. How one shall get, according to police and judicial records, will be really given access, and don't you think many records, mostly controversial, are destroyed by the state and will never be able to recover them? Yes, I agree that most of the records are controversial and they might not give us access, but there are ways. There are ways such as you can go to a local archive. Okay, you can go to the state archive. Like obviously you cannot find contemporary abhi ka bhi aapko nahi milega, but if you go to a Patna archive, if you go to Allahabad GB Pallap Institute, you can always find the data till 1990. They have those records, so you can find that. It's also depend on your timeline, which timeline you are trying to access. If you are trying to access, let's say post 2000, I don't think you will get anything. No, but if you are working something like pre 2000, then there's a possibility that you will get a good amount of data in the local libraries, online portals also. Even National Archive has now opened a new section on contemporary history where they're providing these details. Now, how historical sources different from other disciplinary sources, how to be sure that literature review that one has done is exhaustive. Uh, Historical sources are different because we are not talking about secondary sources. We're talking about primary sources. Like this book is a secondary source. This is written by somebody. This is a diary, not a book. So this is written by somebody, right? Now this book contains the opinions of a particular author who wrote it. Now when I'm finding, let's say, a primary source, a rare document, right, which was there in the archive. Now here, this is a historical data. Now it's up to you how you are going to write it. Hello, sir. Thank you for the session. My question is like when we are writing our content, we are referring to many historicals and many arguments, different books. When we have to write conclusion, go about it, and like what is the continuation, how you can give our content. With the limited knowledge we have about certain topic, I hope you understand what I'm asking here. Okay. Again, I'm again going to repeat the same thing. Don't worry about the writing at the beginning of your research. First, collect the data, do a field work, gather information. Whatever you have, whatever topic you want to work on, gather information. What kind of primary sources are there? What kind of secondary sources there? Is there a field work possibility if your topic allows you? What are the oral histories? Is there any documentary available on this particular subject? So first task is gather the data. Once you gather the data, automatically, trust me, automatically you will have a blueprint in your mind to what I'm going to write. Now, my research is on women refugees and urban planning of Delhi during 1950s, understanding their linkage. Is there any resource or paper or book suggestion which can be helpful? Okay. Women refugees and urban planning, you can read Bega Manish Kidwai. It's a majorly available everywhere, so I'm sure you know that. Bega Manish Kidwai ke alawa, you can also read Krishna Sobti. She wrote about Delhi. She wrote about refugees in different parts of Delhi, their employment, their conditions. Krishna Sobti, the book has been published with different names. Just write Krishna Sobti. Okay, Begum and Skidwai. These are some historians that you can find about Delhi urban planning and women, especially refugee colonies. Okay. Anubhuti has a question. Okay. There have been major shifts in historiography. You mentioned that colonial history is comparatively easy to historicize and narrativize. What are your thoughts on the Adivasi histories and oral histories, folklores, given the fact that they are non-linear societies? Kindly note what may be myths to mainstream societies can be stories. Yes. Even subaltern and Marxist historians are unable fully grasp the complexity of Adivasi. This is such a brilliant question. Thank you, Anubhuti. And Anubhuti is my senior, by the way. Yes, understand. So you can understand the context when you look at it. These cartoons, which were popular, these cartoons are also a very. Please unmute yourself. Thank you. Now, this is a very important point, right? So when I said that historical colonial history is easy, I'm not suggesting that colonial history is easily descripting everything and they have maintained archives of everything. No, I'm saying I suggested this on a very layman level for the graduation kids because when you go to an archive, you can access it, you can have it. And yes, Adivasi histories and oral histories are an important part, as I mentioned in my talk also, that you can always bring that new flavor, right? Like when you read about Adivasi culture, right? People belonging to Northern India, people belonging to mainstream culture. I always do this exercise in the class also. Like the moment you hear Adivasi, what kind of picture that comes to your mind? You have a picture which has so many stereotypes and all, right? So that image is a product of this colonial historiography, colonial mainstream idea that we have that particular image, somebody is playing the dhol or somebody is carrying the bow and arrow, right? This is what history, colonial mainstream history has taught us. This is a very kind of a right idea. So here, when you're working on this, you can always bring. So like I read that book about Birsa Munda, right? And I was introduced about, you can say, how to look at history from below. And yes, it's quite right to say that subaltern and Marxist are also, never actually fulfill the gap, because subaltern um, and Marxist, you can see they want to talk about class history, class aspects of history. The problem, according to me, is that how to navigate through it. When we're talking about history from class, right? It's also about a question that who gets to write history, right? Which class of people are actually aware about, keeping history, keeping records. Like my house, most of us doesn't even know the value of the historical things in our houses. We don't keep these. Like, who has this awareness to keep those things, to write about those things? So even if you look at the subaltern and Marxists, most of them actually does not come from the Adivasi background, does not come from the Dalit background. Most of these people are coming from the same upper caste Savarna background. And when they are writing history, they are trying to just snatch the mic. This is how I see it. How Marxists and subalterns have, I do not have the, I'm not saying everyone. I'm a huge fan, I'm a huge admirer of Saeed Amin's work and all that. But at the same time, when you look at it, we understand that there is a problem that we need to understand and address it. Okay, thank you.
So I'll take one more question from Anushka Soni. Anushka, please go ahead with your question.
Yes, sir. Sir, I've chosen archaeological surveys in colonial era as a tool for imperial legitimacy as my topic for MA dissertation. Can you suggest me in-depth themes for my study, and if there are any sources I will be checking out, and if my topic holds any relevance?
Can you repeat your topic?
Sir, it is archaeological surveys in colonial era as a tool for imperial legitimacy.
Uh, mm, have you, you can always, you can start with something like a book called The Delhi Omnibus by Narayani Gupta, right?
Sorry, sir.
The Delhi Omnibus by Narayani Gupta.
Okay, sir.
Right. Now, this book talks about the creation of New Delhi as a capital, right?
Okay, sir.
And in that process, how different areas of New Delhi, like Raisina Hills, right? But how Raisina Hills was also a village earlier when the British took over, they took the land. Those records are available at the archive. So yes, one reading you can refer to, although it's not directly related to your thesis, but I'm sure that this can also give you a kind of a background, kind of a path to go ahead with your topic.
All right. So there's one more person from Lenovo. Please go ahead with the question.
Yes, thank you so much, Aditya. I just have one very important question, Mr. Shashi. First of all, thank you so much for this session. It was really, really productive. Second, sir, could you please suggest or please share your 2 cents on how somebody could use probably AI or artificial intelligence with regards to accessing these manuscripts and probably archives? And I'm specifically saying this because somebody like me who does not really possess as much time, I'm doing this on the side. I work primarily. So accessing everything is a little difficult. So could you please share 2 cents on how we can actually legitimately access certain manuscripts which would help us with our research? That is one. And a very brief question about the Dalit politics that you briefly were addressing some time back. We know for a fact when people have dug way too much into politics related to land grants or land basically the transfer of ownership related to tribal lands or Dalit lands, etc., etc. We know what has happened to those people for primarily like GN Sai Baba or somebody like Gori Lankesh. So is the solution not engaging with these topics because these are particularly problematic or very conservative for a certain set of people, or is there a different approach that we could take probably to approach these topics in a manner in which we would also ensure safety not only to ourselves but the people that we are kind of interacting with? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. First question is about AI tools. My stand is very clear about using AI in your research. Yes, you can use AI, but let me complete. You can use AI in the initial process of your research. You can find different kind of manuscript materials like archive.org. It's a website where you can download Z Library, Libsyn. There are multiple websites, multiple tools that you can actually do that. When it comes to using AI in your research as a writing tool, there is a problem because I'm totally against it. Because problem is when you're using an AI tool to write your introduction, write your thesis, yes, you might get a degree. Okay, you might get a job also. But when you stand in the classroom, when you are teaching a topic, how will you address that crowd? This is where the problems come. The human knowledge, the human repository that we have created in the last 5,000 or 7,000 years, can you really rely on AI to answer all those questions? Because also AI is basically a kid and we are teaching him. We are teaching the tool, right? Yes, you can write your thesis, you can get a degree in a very legitimate way, but can you really handle the pressure of standing in the classroom without the knowledge? Because your thesis was produced with the help of AI, and because of another tool, the plagiarism software could not detect any plagiarism. Yes, you can get a degree, but can you handle the classroom? No. And that is why I say that use AI. There are many people on Instagram, on social media who say use AI in your research, how to write literature review, use those tools to write literature review. But if you don't have that experience, right, writing a simple abstract, writing a simple research methodology, writing simple literature review, how are you going to survive? How are you going to be in academia or whatever field you are working with honesty? Honesty to your profession, honesty to your stream. Because If a simple work is done by AI, your introduction, your research methodology, everything, the problem is you just decided not to do it by own, and in that way, you simply debarred yourself from the original authentic research. The Yes, I understand you might not get time to visit a library and all that, but frankly, there is no substitute to going to a library or an archive. Not because in a romantic way of smell of an old book or something, but the idea of getting a book in your hand and read it. What does a book do? A book simply takes you away from the world. When you read a book, it's like conversing with the author. It's like reliving the time. With AI, you are actually not giving yourself a chance to live that part, to feel that way. So that's why my understanding of AI is very clear. Use that in the initial part, technical part. Download the books, take the material, but do not use AI in your research, because one day you will ask yourself, when you're standing in the classroom full of 60 people and 60 people have 60 different questions, that time you will realize that no, I did a mistake. I should have been more honest to my profession and my ID. The second part about being safe. Sorry, but there is no safer side. You have to take a side. Okay. It's not a kind of some kind of a game happening in research where you can take a safer topic, and so both the camps will not target you. History is political. History is a political war. It's a war of narrative. Everyone who is part of the research, part of the genuine research, knows this, that if they are writing, they are taking a side. If I'm talking, my work is about in the emergency in JP Morgan. My work is about communal rights in Jamshedpur. If I'm not going to talk about the victims, if I'm not talking about their suffering, then I'm not a researcher. I'm just a people pleaser. I'm just kind of getting a degree in order to get a job. So, in my opinion, there is no safer side. You have to take a side. There is no other option. You have to take a side, because history is not just, history is a political subject. History is a political subject where everything, every discussion is political. From Adivasi studies to gender studies to Dalit studies, everything. Who owns the land? Who cultivates the land? वो कविता है ना कि गांव भी ठाकुर का, खेत भी ठाकुर का, पानी भी ठाकुर का. That is a historical reality. When we are researching about it, we have to be true to our ideas. If you are not true, if you are trying to be safe in your research, then the problem is the kind of work that one will produce will not be history writing. It's a propaganda material. That's my opinion on this subject.
Two more people are there, sir. I think, and we'll take only these two questions.
Sorry?
There are two more people. Yatharth, please go with the question.
Okay.
Good morning, sir. Myself, Yatharth Singh Vatsyagi. I am a student of History Honors and currently I am in second year. In the future, I will do research in Indo-Aryan religion, Indo-European. And in current time, I have one problem with respect to reading books. When I read books, like I was reading the biography of Napoleon Bonaparte, and then I can't remember everything, and the language is very difficult, and it takes a lot of time to read a book. I will say I have read just 10 pages, and it takes 1 to 2 hours, and I cannot grasp the knowledge of that 10 pages also. And this is the problems of reading a thick book. The language is very typical. Then what to do? The main thing is to understand. If you are reading something, that the main thing is to understand, not just reading the book. This is the main problem from which I am facing. Everything which I am reading, it takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of time in reading, in understanding the thing. This is the problem, and how to solve it.
Okay. There's another person, right, Aditya?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Can we take the question?
Yes, Vanshika, please go ahead.
Thank you, sir, for this session. Sir, I had the question I mentioned in the chat box, but not very clear. Sir, in my master's, when I did a study, so my professor Prabhu Prasad Mohapatra sir was, so he introduced me to the idea that historical sources is even a word, even a line, and it differs from sociological surveys uh, in that you have to do like a lot of interviews and these. So, sir, as you mentioned that you have done 70 interviews and only 15 of them were worthful of mentioning. So, sir, I wanted to ask this, sir, one thing he told me when just while commenting on my paper. So, sir, is there some source from where I could understand? Okay, this is thought to be like how to be sure that what could be the possible method of deriving something like a historical source? Are there like this is one point? Are there any others? And the second question is, sir, as you mentioned a bit earlier, that the conditioning of your writing process, your collection of material. So, as while reading, like whatever little I have read, so most of the times the critique comes that okay, this historian himself has some sort of bias, or if it is a colonialist historian, what biases he carries, or some other. So, sir, like how to go beyond the self, like for excavating the truth, for being truthful to history, presenting it as it is. So, like, what would be your suggestions to it? कि हम अपनी कंडीशनिंग से उस ट्रुथ को प्रिजर्व करके रखें.
Okay, thank you, Vanshika. I'll just briefly answer to यथार्थ first. यथार्थ, क्या आप मुझे सुन सकते हैं?
Yes, sir, he is there in the meeting.
Okay. What is important for a historian, from a, for anyone, for a researcher? Important thing is not language. Important thing is subject, knowledge. Like, if I tell you, I came from a Hindi background. I did my graduation and post-graduation in Hindi medium. I used to write in Hindi. MA 4th semester तक DU में दिल्ली विश्वविद्यालय में, since they allow us to write in Hindi, तो मैं हिंदी में लिखता था, right? I'm thankful to, I'm just grateful to teachers like Saeed Amin, Amar Faruqi, and the seniors who never made us feel that, oh, we are anyone less. ये पहली बात है कि भाषा इंपॉर्टेंट नहीं है, नॉलेज इंपॉर्टेंट. द सेम काइंड ऑफ आर्गुमेंट, द सेम आंसर्स. आपको क्लास में भी कभी कभी फील होता होगा कि आपको आंसर पता है, बट सिंस यू लैक कॉन्फिडेंस, आप आंसर नहीं दे पाए. लेकिन आपको आंसर पता है. आप खुद से पूछ के देखिएगा, आपको आंसर पता है. आप आंसर क्यों नहीं दे पाए? बिकॉज आपको लगता है कि ओ, ऑल दिस इंग्लिश मीडियम पीपल, दे आर बेटर ट्रेन, दे आर. इट्स नॉट लाइक दैट. Especially in a profession like teaching, think about it, how it's going to benefit you. When I go in the classroom, now I speak Hindi, I speak Bhojpuri, I speak Bengali, I speak a little bit of Malayalam, I speak English. What you think is weakness, it can be a stronger point for you. Your multilingual personality can be a very good thing in your profession. जहां तक बात यह है कि रीडिंग समझ नहीं आती, राइट? रीडिंग आई अंडरस्टैंड, रीडिंग नहीं समझ में आती. मेरे साथ भी यही होता था, बिकॉज जब मैं हिंदी मीडियम में आया, मैं आपको एक एग्जांपल देता हूँ. फर्स्ट ईयर आई ज्वाइंड बीए. सोशल फॉर्मेशन में सिर्फ एक किताब थी, अमर फारूकी, ठीक है. और एंशिएंट इंडिया में सिर्फ एक किताब थी हिंदी में, DN झा, झा श्रीमाली, सॉरी, राइट. इन दो किताबों में पूरा फर्स्ट ईयर निकल गया हमारा, राइट. एंड देन आई वेंट टू द टीचर. मैं हिस्ट्री का स्टूडेंट था, बिहार से हूँ, तो यूपीएससी भी करना चाहता था, अब नहीं कर, तो वो खैर अलग बात है. तो मैं गया अपनी टीचर के पास, ऑलमोस्ट क्राइंग, कि मैम मैं पढ़ना चाहता हूँ बट रीडिंग्स है ही नहीं मेरे पास, राइट. एंड आई रिमेंबर माई प्रोफेसर टेलिंग मी कि भाषा इंपॉर्टेंट नहीं है, नॉलेज इंपॉर्टेंट है. सो जस्ट ट्राई रीडिंग इंग्लिश मटेरियल. आई स्टार्टेड रीडिंग. इन सेकेंड ईयर, ऑल्दो इंग्लिश में एक किताब हुआ करती थी, आधुनिक पश्चिम का उदय, पार्थसारथी गुप्ता, हिंदी मीडियम की आती थी, इकलौती किताब. बट बिकॉज ऑफ दैट पुश ऑफ माय प्रोफेसर, I took the Meenakshi Fukan and Burns and everything. ज़्यादा कुछ समझ में नहीं आया, but at least I started, right? And then I realized कि when we, people like us from the marginalized background, from non-English background, when we come to this field, we bring a perspective with us. हम अपने साथ एक नया नजरिया लेके आते हैं. आज जब मैं क्लास में पढ़ाता हूँ, जब मैं बिहार के एग्जाम्पल देता हूँ, भोजपुरी गानों के एग्जाम्पल देता हूँ, that becomes your speciality. Because you remember your roots, you bring that in the classroom, which is, by the way, not even in the discussion in the classroom. जो आज हम जैसे कहते हैं ना, मेन स्ट्रीम एकेडमिया में ये सब्जेक्ट नहीं है, हमारे जैसे लोगों की वो जिम्मेदारी है कि हम उस चीज को समझें, उस चीज को जानें, और उस सब्जेक्ट को जो अभी तक डिस्कशन में नहीं, उसको लेकर आए. तो जैसे मैंने आपको बताया वो विदेशिया गाना जो भोजपुरी में है, सो लैंग्वेज को लेकर परेशान मत होइए, आ जाएगी धीरे धीरे, एकदम आ जाएगी. एमफिल में जाने के बाद भी जेएनयू में आई वाज नॉट कॉन्फिडेंट. मेरे लिए सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट रहा इंग्लिश सीखने के मामले में पीएचडी राइटिंग. सिंस 2018 आई स्टार्टेड राइटिंग, गलत सही कुछ भी लिखता रहा. जहां तक रीडिंग की बात है, तो एक काम करिए, व्हेन यू आर रीडिंग, मैंने आपको पहले बताया था, टेक नोट्स. जिस भी भाषा में आप कंफर्टेबल है, अगर आप हिंदी में कंफर्टेबल हैं तो हिंदी में उसका अनुवाद करके लिखिए, राइट? नॉलेज नहीं जानी चाहिए. जस्ट बिकॉज आपको अंग्रेजी नहीं आती इसका मतलब ये कि आप उसको नहीं पढ़ेंगे. आप उसको पढ़िए, अंडरलाइन करिए, एंड साइड में या कॉपी में, नोटबुक में उसका पॉइंट का हिंदी में अनुवाद करके लिखते जाइए. एट द एंड ऑफ द रीडिंग, द डिस्कशन, द अंडरस्टैंडिंग जो आपके पास होगी, वो सबसे अलग होगी. वाई? क्योंकि आप अपने साथ अपनी पृष्ठभूमि भी लेकर आए हैं, और आपकी पृष्ठभूमि आपके इतिहास निर्माण में, उस संकलन, उस अवधारणा में एक महती भूमिका अदा करेगी. ठीक है. दूसरा क्वेश्चन था वंशिका का, सॉरी मैं वंशिका क्वेश्चन भूल गया.
Yes, sir. Sir, it was first like how the historical sources are different from other sources, like sociological survey, or we have to conduct a lot of data.
वंशिका,
And
मैं इसका एक बहुत शॉर्ट आंसर दूंगा कि अगर आपने अभी तक ईएच कार नहीं पढ़ी है, या फिर मार्क ब्लॉक, या फिर ई श्रीधरन, या आरजे कॉलिंगवुड, these 3 to 4 books in history are the key to understand what is historical source, what is not. So I'll suggest start with E.H. Carr, सबसे आसान रीडिंग है. Then you can go to Mark Block, then you can read E. Sridharan, and then you can go with all the other readings. So I'll suggest start reading with E.H. Carr. अगर आपने अभी तक नहीं पढ़ी है, तो अगर उसको पढ़ लिया है, then you have to shift to Mark Block, then R.J. Collingwood, then other authors. Okay.
So thank you very much, sir, for your time. And I think we already had so many questions. So really grateful to everyone who has joined. We had more than 100 people trying to join to Zoom, and we had almost 100 people on YouTube Live. So really grateful to everyone, and thank you very much. Have a good day.
So much.